The moment I stepped outside, my stomach dropped. Shattered glass crunched beneath my boots as I surveyed the wreckage of my solar panels. Panels that had powered my home and saved me thousands. Someone had destroyed them, not just broken, but obliterated. Panels ripped from their mounts, wiring slashed, glass panels smashed to dust. I clenched my fists. I knew exactly who had done this. The HOA had been on my back for months, claiming my solar panels were an eyesore. Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood, had led the charge against me. And now, standing amid the wreckage, I could practically hear her smug laughter. But Karen didn't know who she was messing with. She thought she had won, that she could bully me into submission. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't just some homeowner with solar panels. I was the regional director of the state's power grid. And if she wanted a war over energy, I had the ultimate power play waiting for her. I took a deep breath, already formulating my plan. Karen was about to learn the hard way that you don't bite the hand that controls the lights. I wasn't just any homeowner trying to cut down on energy bills. I was Daniel Carter, a seasoned electrical engineer and the regional director of the state's power grid. I had spent 20 years in the energy sector, ensuring the lights stayed on for millions of people. But when I moved into this suburban neighborhood, I never expected to fight a battle over something as simple as solar panels. I bought this house 2 years ago, drawn to its sprawling backyard and quiet streets. It was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place where I could finally settle down. My job was demanding power outages, grid failures, and bureaucratic nightmares, but at least my home was supposed to be my retreat. So, I invested in state-of-the-art solar panels not just for savings, but because I believed in clean energy. That's when I met Karen Whitmore, the HOA president. From the moment I moved in, she made it clear she didn't like me. She hid it under fake smiles, but her passive-aggressive comments gave her away. "Oh, Daniel, I hope you'll follow our HOA rules. We have such high standards here." First, I ignored it, but then came the notices. Fines for minor landscaping infractions, letters demanding I remove unsightly solar equipment, and veiled threats about neighborhood aesthetics. Karen was the kind of person who thrived on control. She ruled the HOA with an iron fist, dictating everything from mailbox designs to holiday decorations. Most of the neighbors feared her, too tired or indifferent to fight back. Some even sympathized with me but warned, "Karen always gets her way." But I wasn't the type to be pushed around. I attended HOA meetings, argued my case, and even got a lawyer involved. I knew my rights. Federal law protected my solar panels. But Karen didn't care about the law. She wanted power. And when she couldn't beat me legally, she resorted to something worse. That morning, standing among the ruins of my shattered panels, I realized Karen had crossed a line. This wasn't about HOA rules anymore. This was personal. She wanted to send a message that no one defied her authority. I took a deep breath, my mind already racing with possibilities. Karen thought she could control the power in this neighborhood. But what she didn't know was that I controlled the power for the entire region. And if she wanted to play dirty, I could play even dirtier. I spent the next few hours documenting the damage. Photos, videos, detailed notes, everything I'd need to file a police report and an insurance claim. But as I kneeled beside a particularly mangled panel, something glinted beneath the debris. A small, discarded gold earring. My lips curled into a grim smile. Karen. It wasn't just a hunch. She had been running her mouth for weeks, openly complaining about how my panels were ruining the neighborhood's charm. At last month's HOA meeting, she even joked, "If only a storm would just take care of them." Looks like she got tired of waiting. I stood up, fists clenched. This wasn't vandalism by some random kid, it was deliberate sabotage. But Karen had no idea who she had messed with. I wasn't some powerless homeowner she could intimidate. I had resources, connections, and most importantly, control over the entire regional power grid. I debated my next move carefully. I could go straight to the cops, press charges, and drag her through the legal system. But something told me that wouldn't be enough. Karen had gotten away with bullying people for years because no one ever fought back properly. She was arrogant, smug, and believed she was untouchable. I wanted her to feel powerless. That's when the idea struck me. A slow grin spread across my face as I glanced toward her house. It was a hot summer week, temperatures soaring past 95 degrees. People in the neighborhood were running their air conditioning at full blast. And Karen? She practically lived in her mini-mansion, hosting HOA meetings and sipping iced tea on her perfectly curated patio. What would happen if, say, her electricity went out? Not the entire neighborhood, of course, that would be reckless. But a strategic, targeted maintenance blackout affecting just one address? That was well within my professional discretion. After all, the power grid required routine tests and recalibrations. Sometimes, certain homes experience temporary, unavoidable disruptions, and as fate would have it, Karen's house was due for an inspection. I pulled out my phone and logged into my work system, my heartbeat steady. I wasn't doing anything illegal. I was simply scheduling an unexpected service outage for Karen Whitmore's home. 5 hours. No AC. No lights. No refrigerator. No HOA emails or surveillance cameras. As I hit confirm, I imagined Karen's face when her power flickered off, how she'd stomp outside, confused and furious. This was only the beginning. I watched from my porch as Karen's perfect little world crumbled. It started with a flicker, just a few lights dimming inside her mansion. Then suddenly, everything cut out. No air conditioning, no Wi-Fi, no security cameras. The hum of her water fountain stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its place. First, she didn't notice, but within minutes, I saw her storm out onto her porch, phone in hand, furiously tapping the screen. I chuckled. No Wi-Fi, Karen. Welcome to the Stone Age. Minutes later, I heard the familiar slam of her heels against pavement as she marched to her car. She yanked open the door and sat inside, probably trying to charge her phone. Too bad garages need power to open. She was trapped, fuming, sweating in the summer heat. She tried calling the utility company next, except I already knew what they'd say. Routine maintenance. Unavoidable disruptions. Should be back in a few hours. She had no idea I was the one who scheduled it. I took a slow sip of iced tea, savoring the moment. But this wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. The next morning, Karen's power was restored. I expected her to come charging over, demanding answers. But instead, she took a different approach. She called an emergency HOA meeting. Normally, I ignored those meetings. They were a joke. Just Karen barking orders at everyone while her minions nodded. But this time, I wanted to hear what she had to say. So I showed up. The meeting was held at the community center, a pristine space with chandeliers and glossy floors. Funded, of course, by HOA fees. Karen stood at the front, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room like a hawk. The moment she saw me, her lips curled into a sneer. "We need to address a serious issue," she announced, voice sharp. "Our power grid is failing. The outage yesterday was just the beginning. If we don't take action, our property values will plummet." I almost laughed. She had no clue I was the one behind the outage. But what caught my attention was her solution. "I propose a new HOA rule," she continued. "Private solar panels must be removed immediately. They're interfering with the community's energy stability." My fists clenched. There it was. Her endgame. She wasn't just trying to punish me. She wanted to ban solar panels altogether, using the blackout as a scare tactic. I stood. "That's ridiculous," I said. "Solar panels don't cause power failures. If anything, they make homes more self-sufficient." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Then why did we have an outage?" I smiled. "Maybe you should ask the power grid director." Her smirk faltered. "And who would that be?" I took a slow step forward. "Me." The room fell silent. Karen's face paled as whispers rippled through the crowd. This was the moment she realized her biggest enemy wasn't just a stubborn homeowner. It was the man controlling the entire power infrastructure. After the meeting, neighbors came up to me, shaking my hand. "We had no idea you worked in energy," one said. "We support solar, but Karen's got everyone scared." I nodded, realizing that Karen had been manipulating them for years, feeding them lies about energy, fear-mongering about property values, making them believe they had no choice but to obey her. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to stop Karen. I was going to take the HOA down completely. Step 1. Public exposure. I contacted a local news station, offering an expert interview on solar energy myths and how HOAs were hurting progress. They loved the angle, especially when they learned about my personal battle. Within days, my story was on the front page of the local paper. Step 2. Legal action. I filed an official vandalism report against Karen, using the evidence I'd gathered, including that gold earring. The police weren't fast, but they didn't ignore me either. An investigation was opened. Step 3. Cutting off Karen's influence. I started attending every HOA meeting, challenging every unfair fine, exposing every shady financial decision. Neighbors started seeing the truth. Slowly, the tides were turning. But Karen, she wasn't backing down. She was about to make her biggest mistake yet. Karen was cornered, and she knew it. The police had begun questioning her about the vandalism. The HOA was losing faith in her, and my public campaign had turned neighbors against her. But instead of retreating, she did what bullies do when they feel threatened. She doubled down. Late one evening, as I sat in my home office reviewing legal documents, my power flickered. Then it went out completely. I checked my phone. The entire neighborhood still had power. Just my house was affected. Karen had just tried to shut me down. I rushed outside and found 2 HOA board members standing near my power meter. One of them, a man named Greg, looked nervous. The other, Karen's right-hand lackey, smirked as he locked the meter box. "You can't tamper with my electricity," I said, voice low and steady. Greg gulped. The other man shrugged. "Actually, Daniel, the HOA has emergency powers to cut energy in non-compliant homes. You're in violation of HOA standards." I took a slow step forward. "That's illegal." Greg's eyes darted to the other guy. "Maybe we should." Before he could finish, a blinding spotlight flooded the yard. A police car. Karen stood behind them, arms crossed, her expression smug. "Oh, Daniel, tampering with electrical systems? That's a serious offense." I realized what she was doing. She wasn't just trying to cut my power. She was trying to have me arrested. She had called the cops, hoping they'd believe her story, that I was the one breaking the law, that I was the dangerous one. The officer stepped out of his cruiser, glanced at Karen, then at me. "Sir, are you aware that?" I cut him off. "I'm Daniel Carter, Regional Director of the State Power Grid, and this woman is illegally tampering with my home's electricity." The officer's expression shifted. He recognized my name. Karen's confidence wavered. "He's lying. He's just some guy." "I'm also the man who reported your vandalism," I said, stepping toward her, "and the man who's been gathering evidence for weeks." I turned to the officer. "Check the meter. If they tampered with it, there'll be clear signs." The cop nodded and motioned for Greg to unlock the box. Karen went pale. Greg's hands shook as he fumbled for the key. When the box opened, the officer took one look inside. "Yeah," he said. "This is definitely illegal." Karen blanched. "Wait. This is just a misunderstanding." The officer pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, we have an HOA-related energy tampering case. We're gonna need." Karen's world was crumbling. And this time there was no escape. Karen's composure shattered the moment she realized the police weren't on her side. She tried to backtrack, her voice rising in frantic desperation. I didn't mean for this to happen. This is just a misunderstanding. I was only following HOA guidelines." The officer wasn't buying it. He shook his head as he turned to Greg. "And you? Did you willingly participate in cutting power to a resident's home?" Greg looked like he wanted to disappear. His forehead glistened with sweat as he avoided Karen's glare. I was just following orders. The officer sighed. That's not how the law works. Karen started shrieking about injustice and how this neighborhood was falling apart. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. The officers detained her for questioning, while Greg and the other HOA enforcer were warned that they, too, could face charges for their involvement. As they led Karen toward the patrol car, she twisted her head toward me. Her face was contorted with rage, her perfect suburban queen persona reduced to nothing. You did this. You ruined everything. I smiled. No, Karen. You did. The moment her car pulled away, a small cheer erupted from the watching neighbors. People who had once been too scared to challenge her were now stepping forward, emboldened. I wasn't the only one she had tormented. With Karen out of the picture, the dominoes fell fast. The HOA board, desperate to distance themselves from her, held an emergency vote. Within a week, Karen was officially removed as HOA president. Greg, eager to save his own skin, resigned before they could vote him out. With them gone, I took things a step further. I rallied the community, exposing years of Karen's abuse and misuse of HOA funds. People who had quietly suffered under her rule finally found their voices. We discovered dozens of bogus fines, selective enforcement of rules, and fraudulent financial dealings. By the time we were done, the entire HOA board collapsed. And then the final vote came in. The neighborhood officially dissolved the HOA. The morning after the final vote, I walked outside to find my neighbors gathered on the street. A celebration was brewing. A group of kids were running across someone's freshly cut lawn, something that would have once resulted in a Karen-level meltdown. People were painting their fences whatever colors they wanted. One guy was setting up a backyard chicken coop, something Karen had banned years ago. I saw my neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, beaming at me. You did it, Daniel. You freed us. I smiled, feeling the weight of the battle finally lift from my shoulders. No, we did it. Together. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I walked into my backyard, where shattered glass and ruined panels had once littered the ground. New solar panels now stood, stronger, more advanced, and completely untouchable by HOA nonsense. I ran my fingers along the smooth panels, feeling the warmth of the stored energy beneath them. Karen had tried to destroy progress, to force everyone under her rule through fear. But in the end, the power had always been in my hands. And now, I had made sure it belonged to everyone. Months passed and the neighborhood transformed. Without the HOA's iron grip, people reclaimed their homes. Fences were painted in bright, cheerful colors. Gardens flourished where Karen's strict landscaping rules had once kept everything uniform and dull. Solar panels sprouted on rooftops like seeds of change, no longer subject to fines or threats. One evening, as I stood on my porch, a soft breeze carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass, my neighbor Mrs. Jenkins strolled over, carrying a pie. She handed it to me with a warm smile. For everything you've done. I laughed. You don't owe me anything, Mrs. Jenkins. She shook her head. It's not about owing. It's about gratitude. As she walked back home, I looked around. Kids rode their bikes freely. A family grilled in their backyard, their fence lined with solar lights. The fear Karen had instilled was gone. She had tried to control us, to hoard power for herself. But in the end, power belongs to the people who stand up and fight for what's right. I took one last look at my newly installed solar panels, gleaming in the fading sunlight. Karen had once thought she could destroy my power. Instead, I had empowered an entire community.